Hello and happy 4th of July if you are in North America, celebrating Independence Day today with this question and answer session. Also, we got a surprise announcement for some bands that have just been revealed, and I actually had questions already about those, so that'll be near the end of the video, so stick around for those. As always, if you want a question asked, feel free to submit to the Q&A channel in the Discord below, or you can message them to me on Twitter, put them in the video, the comments of this video. Just make sure you put a little Q&A tag so I know you want it answered for the video. And other than that, let's hop right to it. Soranoka asks, who's the edgiest character in the whole FF series in your opinion? The first person that came to mind is Vincent from Final Fantasy VII. I was trying to think beyond him, like, you could, I don't know, is Amarant from FF9 really edgy? I feel like he's just a lot more stoic. Yeah, he doesn't really strike me as edgy. And granted, Vincent doesn't really strike me as edgy either, not in the sense of, at least what I think of in the word. I guess I think of like a teenager, 17, 16, wearing goth clothes, who's purposely trying to say like really deep or, you know, controversial things. I don't think Vincent's personality is like that, but his attire definitely gives me that vibe. So I'm going to say Vincent from Final Fantasy VII, but I don't actually know how accurate that is. Rosie Rio asks, what kind of content do you think the community is lacking/desires? You know, I always think about all the different types of videos I can do, and I've done deck techs, I've done player interviews, I've done commentary on matches, I've played some matches myself on the stream. And there's, you know, to a degree, there's only so much you can really talk about that's new before you're treading in old territory, right? But what I've always wanted to see, I don't know if the community feels this way, but I can't imagine they wouldn't like this. I would just love to see more from the developers themselves. I would love insight into why the developers make the cards the way they do. You know, other than like the bands, which again I'll touch on a little later, that's the only time you ever get a slight insight into maybe how they're thinking. Because if I know why they designed a card X way, whether I like the card or love it or hate it or whatever, it really helps when I know, oh, okay, that's what they're thinking of. So for me, I've always just wanted to hear more from the developers themselves, or Hobby Japan, why do they pick the certain characters over and over again? You know, it's easy to make fun of the fact that Lightning's got her 20th or 30th or millionth card, but you know, what's the reasoning behind that? You hear speculation from the community, oh, it's because Lightning's popular in Japan, but it would just be nice to hear someone official say that as well. So granted, again, I don't know if the community as a whole would like that, but why wouldn't you like words from the developers themselves and, you know, from the source? I feel like everyone could really appreciate that. Adam C. asks, what's the single best card in each element and why, including multi-elements? Oh boy, this is a big one. Okay, so for each element, fire is Amaterasu. I mean, just auto abilities are the most prevalent common abilities in this game, so the fact that it can stop those as well as kill them if it's a forward potentially is just huge. There's just no really other card like it, and an instant speed to summon. For ice, I went with Byblos. I almost picked Lastwell out of personal bias, but I think Byblos is probably the most valuable all-around ice card. You could argue Unalesca as well. That's the other one I thought of just because it's so prominent, and I'm thinking again in kind of the current meta and everything. But I think Byblos is, I think I just value, I don't know, he seems very strong, so go with Byblos. Probably because, again, monsters, there's not a lot of monster interaction with the exception of certain decks, so it's very easy for him to set off to the side and just keep getting value. Wind is Althea, because she's just absurd and broken and, you know, gives you value on entry, can essentially makes it cheaper, free cast, protection, infinite uses of any cards, just an absurd card. It was absurd when it came out, and then crazy it took him this long to ban it. Earth, still got to be Shantoto. I mean, there's just nothing, nothing has surpassed this. It's a board wipe, and it gets you a backup, and it color fixes you, like, all for, you know, and 7 is the right price for a card like this, so, yep, Earth is still Shantoto. Lightning was the one I struggled the most with. I think right now it's got to be Ixion. Ixion is the best pure lightning card, especially as cards get cheaper. This card will only get more and more powerful, more valuable, because especially if everyone's just playing 2, 1, 3 costs eventually, Ixion's just going to get stronger and stronger, so this one's definitely here to stay. And then water is Syldra, of course, because it just gets you anything you could possibly want in the entire deck, which is incredible, and even has the category 5 part, which is just freaking amazing. I always knew this card was going to be strong. You can go way back to my Opus 12 review with Mysidia Gaming talking about it. Although at the time, it wasn't nearly as bad because there just weren't as many pieces and the multi-elements were just starting. So, but yeah, this one has definitely gotten insane. But I think back in Opus 12, it was actually okay. Just maybe for that. I think the moment Sophie came out, it probably had already tipped over at that point. And then for multi-elements, so Fire Ice is probably Axstar. Yeah, because in Celtius is just too hard to hit. I think Ice Wind is still Locke. As insane as Sid Hayes is, and he is insane, he certainly gives Locke. I mean, Locke is just... if this card is ever not worth playing, like, I can't even imagine the state the game is in. Earth Wind, I can't remember what the new one, so we'll come back to that one. Earth Lightning... None of these ever made like a huge impact. Lightning Water has got to either be the new Lightning or this Thancred, even though you don't see him a whole lot. Water Fire, I'm going to personally pick Ferris just because I'm biased and I totally like Warriors of Light, although Gawain is pretty essential in the Knights build, and then obviously New Furion is quite good as well. Lastwell was solid, but I don't think he overtakes the others. Man, Fire Wind had some... real duds. It's got to be the new Zidane, right? New Legend Zidane. Yeah, Hope. Ice Earth. We'll get to that in a second. I still think it's White Tiger Lassie Nimbus. This is like one of my favorite cards. This is what I want on just a pure ice card. And he's great. Legit, the only reason you don't see him as much is because he has to be played off of backups. But my good golly, is he great when he comes down. So some people might say the new Prish or Larketius. It's certainly hard to argue that those have a lot easier utility. But for my money... I like White Tiger. Wind Lightning. Did we get a new one that's better than him? And is Wind Earth? Gudon, we'll come back to that. Sophie is obviously Earth Water, even with the insanity that is Earth Water has. Look at all the choices it gets. Doga, Ceremobius, Sophie, Garnet, Une. the Maya is the only one that's like not even there. Ramza, Fire Lightning. I love 9, but he's very restricted to where he's at. Probably the new Ishtola is the best one, so we'll say that. Fire Water might be Yuzuki too. I mean, again, you don't see it all the time, but it's there. Fire Earth, it has to be Barrett just because of how good Avalanche is. Ice Water just has nothing really going for it, so I'll just pick Celestia because I love that card so much. And Ice Lightning, there's a new Sephiroth. I think it still has to be Zero Mist, though. I think as good as Al Cid is, as good as the Lightning is, as good as new Sephiroth is, I think Zero Mist is the card you fear in those sets. Wind Water still has to be Bond, especially because none of the new Wind Waters I thought were overly amazing. Axstar is definitely... I guess you could argue Bosch is more universal than Barrett, but man, Barrett just makes Avalanche. So I guess you could argue Bosch for the Fire Earth. Come on, load for me, page. Maybe Wind Earth is Fran then. Maybe that's what you pick. Again, it's a bit specialized, but it's just such an insane card. Earth Lightning, yeah, gosh, these 3 are so much better than the old 3. Vanille's cool. You could argue it's kind of Billy Bob. He's not insane or anybody. He's just so generic and he kind of fits anywhere. So probably Billy Bob. It just shows you how much they power crept too from the Opus 12, 13 versions of these cards. We nominated Zidane. Noctis makes a good case for the Earth Wind one too. Although again, kind of specialized. Yeah, probably go with Lightning or Thancred for that one. Mentioned Furion. Who else? Cloud. Oh yeah, that's right. Cloud. I knew there was there's a Wind Lightning card that's prominent. I couldn't think of what it is. It's Cloud. Cloud is the Wind Lightning one. So, yep. I'd say those are Fire Lightning. Who is Fire Lightning? Is Ishtola? That's right. That's what we said. Oh, Ice Water does have Mog. Do I pick Mog over Celestia? You see him more because he fits in the 6 deck. But damn, if I just like that Celestia card. It's cool. And obviously Warrior Light is 4 colors. So there you go. Xavier asks, is perhaps the reason Syldra seems so strong is the lack that other elements have a similar card? If other elements got a Syldra-like summon, would it make Syldra not as bad? Follow-up question, if you were to design a Syldra-like card, what would the associated category be? So that has been something I've talked about for a long, long time, because you're right. Like, let's say you want all the elements to feel equal in their own right. Not that they do the same thing, but that I could take a mono fire deck and it could have just as strong of a chance as mono ice or mono wind or mono water. Whereas right now, mono wind and mono water are way, way stronger than any of the other mono decks you could take. So, and I've often said if they aren't going to pull cards back, they need to push everything. And I've heard other people say this idea too, but yeah, I've been saying this for years. You can go watch some of those old videos where I've legit said the words, if they're not going to ban a card like Syldra, then give every card or give every element a Syldra. Yeah. Now, is it especially well positioned in water? It is. Yuna inherently makes it cheaper. So being 3 versus 4, like if you got to face off against a fire Syldra, you would notice the difference of like, well, water always gets to pay 1 less for it. But that would be huge if every element had this Syldra. Then yeah, that would make a huge difference in bringing them all together. Now, the reason I don't personally like that, and I'd rather pull things back, is because then are you homogenizing the game? Every element has to include this card. Like, to be competitive, you have to include your version of Syldra, Fire Syldra, Ice Syldra, etc. And at which case, are you even building your own deck at that point? And if like, well, you have to include this because you need it just to keep up with the other elements. So would it make it not as bad? Like, it would certainly make things more balanced in the sense that it would be a more even playing field, but I still don't think that would be very fun. And I think it'd be very tiresome to see the same cards constantly in every deck. Oh, there's Fire Syldra, there's Lightning Syldra, whatever. And what category would be? That's a good question. Like, I kind of thought Fire, I thought of category 3 for some reason. I don't know how good that is. Like, you probably want... See, 5 is such an accessible category, and yet it isn't at the same time. Like, it can get all the crystal backups, which is insane, but there's not a whole lot of, like, crazy forwards you get. You can get Neo X-Def, you can get Galoof, but, like, imagine one that could search category 7 forwards. Oh my... Or 7 cards. Like, there's so many 7 cards, so you probably gotta stay away from that. So, thinking of categories like 3, 2, kind of some of the lesser supported ones, that's probably what I'd go with. Kurjan asks, do you think FF-adjacent games like Vagrant Story will ever appear in Final Fantasy TCG? No, I do not. They won't even print the Final Fantasy characters that exist and that need cards. The Tantalus gang from 9. There's so many auxiliary characters from 14 and 7 and 8 that good characters that are memorable and deserve cards. They don't even get one, so I can't see them branching out into another game. That would be a true surprise if they ever did that. Miguel and Angel writes, I'm quite sure you and the professor from Tolarian Community College are twins. Opinions on the matter. I didn't know who he was for the longest time, and my friend Steven, who plays Magic, said, dude, did you know there's a guy who does what you do for FF, but he does it for Magic, and you guys look the same and everything? And he showed me. And yeah, especially now that I've grown my hair out more too, I used to have it really short. Like, I can definitely see the resemblance, and my friend seems to think we kind of have similar mannerisms in the way we talk. But I've watched some of his stuff. He's a great speaker. I really enjoy his channel. I love his setup that he has, like this bookcase. Like, I wish I had the budget he had. I was at the game store today, and I saw on like a deck box. It was a quote, and it said, from Tolarian Community College, one of the best deck boxes. And I was like, how cool is that his quote is there in the store? Like, dude, I'd lose my mind if you could go into a game shop and you picked up, some deck box and it said, Rudros says, it's a great deck box or whatever. That'd be incredible. Dude, if I knew how to get in touch with him, I would love to just play teach him how to play Final Fantasy, especially since it's so similar to Magic. I'd love to come on to his show. Yeah, I would love that. But people have showed me, I definitely see the resemblance and the mannerisms and all that. So yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll get to meet him one day. The one and only Lance Pearson asks, best topping on pizza versus the worst topping on pizza. So I'm very simple standard when it comes to pizza toppings. Pepperoni is my favorite. I love me some pepperoni. I just love pepperoni. So that's my go-to. I know it's very kind of standard accepted one, but I think it's standard for a reason. It's just good and I just like it. So that's always my go-to. Worst, I don't have a single worst one. Not a big fan of anchovies. I don't mind pineapple. I don't think it's great or anything, but it's fine. I'd eat it. You know, and I don't mind most of the vegetables, black olives and onions and peppers, and I don't want it to be. I guess the big thing is I wouldn't want it to stand off of the crust too much. Like I've tried one with broccoli once. I don't want to have to chomp down on a piece of broccoli that's, you know, kind of physically coming out on the crust. Whereas again, pepperoni lays pretty flat. The sausage just kind of easy to bite into. So I guess we'll just say something like anchovies. I can't really think of like this one is the absolute worst, but so I'll say anchovies for now. Another one from the one and only Lance Pearson, who asks, oh, and what deck have you expected or wanted to do well this season but hasn't? I'll be looking at the cards here in the background. There's nothing that I thought would do well and hasn't. There are some things I was hopeful for, particularly the warp, like with the Vein Legend. Just because I always like to see a new key mechanic work, especially when the crystals, I feel like, kind of flopped pretty hard. So I was hoping for warp, even though I pretty much expected it wouldn't. I would love to do the Teodor Vein play, so on turn, you know, they think they've got another turn, and then surprise, they've got to discard 3. But you just never really see it. I mean, you've seen warp with Golbez. I guess that's the most you've seen it, but, you know, yeah. So I'd say the Vein, but again, I didn't really expect it to do well. I was just kind of hoping for it secretly. And then I guess the other one is I'll kind of mention is Warrior of Light, but Warrior of Light has done well. I know Sam Toole won a store championship with it. He came on an interview with me, talked about that. It hasn't, I don't think it's outclassed the 4-color Warrior of Light decks you've seen, but I've seen people do well enough with it. So that makes me happy. I guess, again, like Medine would have been kind of cool to see. Okay, so here's the big one. Here's my final answer is Ice Water. Because I like Ice Water as a dual element, but even in Opus 13, it just didn't really work. This set, it got 3 new cards, and even with the Legend Realm, I've seen no one using it. And when I try it, it's just lacking something. My first instinct is to always say it lacks removal. And like the Realm is cool. It feels good to double cast a Syldra or a Mind Flayer, but I don't know, there's just something clunky about the setup, which is weird, right? Because you have the Sarah backup to go search Princess Sarah. I don't know, the deck's just strange, and maybe it's because none of its dual element cards directly have any removal tied to them. None of them. I think maybe Chime can like bounce a forward if there's 2 on the field, and then it dull freezes the other ones. So yeah, Ice Water I would say is my biggest disappointment. Although again, I didn't really expect it to. Like even with the spoilers, I was pretty wary just reading the cards. I wasn't like, well, this deck's going to be incredible. I was just like, yeah, there's the consistency just isn't here. So, but man, I would love to see Ice Water do well finally. The Custom Card Man asks, can we start getting dedicated meta snapshot videos, like you going over the top 5 or 10 meta decks, and also maybe off meta contenders? I mean, I'm always open to doing new content, so if that's something you and others would like to see, let me know. I will put a link in the description for my friend Ghoul02. He does stuff like this similar on his channel, where after every Materia Cup, he has done like a recap video, and I think he covers some of the other ones too, not just like the NA region. I know he's covered like European ones and the Australian ones, and he'll look at the top decks, and he'll kind of go over them, and he gives his own personal thoughts, and he grades them too. I'll see him be like, I wouldn't have run that card. I'll run this card. So he kind of does something like that, so you should definitely check him out. 1, he's a good buddy of mine, so of course I'm going to, support him. But 2, I think he does a good job with it, and hopefully that's what you're looking for. If it's not, or if there's something you think that maybe what you're asking for is completely different from that, let me know. But yeah, I'm not opposed to that. There's sometimes I feel like, I don't know, like what more can I say about them that either already hasn't been said or anything. And I try to do the player interviews too when right after the events happen. But yeah, we'll look into that. Check out Ghoul's video. Miguel Angel asks, what are some archetypes / jobs / categories / decks you'd love to see being meta that never have been? So I can name a few that aren't prevalent now that I would like to see. I don't know if any of these, I feel like all of these at some point were in the meta. So for example, for category, and it kind of goes with jobs too, is Guardians. And I actually built Guardians this set. I have a physical sleeved Guardians deck because you thought you got this Buddy backup, you've got this new Riku backup. The Riku let you play the Fire Ject in there for more Ject blocks, and it's in the EX Burst. It's a card you're fine playing too. You've got Every, which is a 10 card. You've got the new Yuna, and nobody played it. I don't think I saw a single other person playing Guardians. And when I played it too, it just felt, I don't know what was missing from it. Is it, I think there might be too much 5 CP, 5 cost, what am I trying to say, 5,000 power hate. So like Waka is such an important part of that deck, right? Waka is kind of how you get to that lockout state when you have Waka, Yuna, Orin, probably Tidus, and Eject, and you can just cancel anything from hand, or Waka's just going to remove anything and they have to target Orin first. But, you know, I remember one game I put Waka out, and then they put Warrior of Light out on their turn, attacked, killed Waka on the stack, so I just can't even get close, or they bring Hilder, or just, again, more and more removal pops up. They Ixion and just wipe out Waka and Orin. So it's just like, all right, well, so much for that. So maybe that's why it didn't work. Maybe people were bored of it. Maybe there's some other reason I'm not thinking of. But yeah, I wish, I would love to see Guardians like in the finals. I would much rather call Guardians a Guardians deck because I love Category 10. And as far as jobs too, it was meta, but it never really won events, and that is the old Earth Lightning Scions of the Seventh Dawn list with the Althea backup that gave them all haste. Like, that deck was just so cool, and it felt like it was designed to work together, and it felt like the characters from the game. I felt like I was playing the game, and that was a cool feeling. It was one of the things that drew me into it, that Althea supported them all, and then the Ida had an effect that when she attacked, it did it, but it didn't matter, was it because she was given haste, right? And the Y'shtola, when she attacked, could hit something if you had enough Scions, and she was given haste by Althea, so it worked. And the Minfilia could break something outright if you had enough Scions. Like, that was, I would love to see a revival of that, as opposed to, it seems like the Scions are all just kind of splitting off doing their own thing now, which I guess kind of makes sense if you go by the story, but who cares about that? Like, give me the fun old Earth Lightning deck. But I know that would make it to the top of some old events, but it's I don't think it ever actually won any like Crystal Cups or anything back then. But man, I would love to see a revival of that. Kurjan asks, what do you think is the most underrated / underplayed card of each element? So Kurjan, I thought about, I was thinking over how to answer this question, and I was going to go through and show my card for each element, kind of like I did the earlier ones when he asked what the best is. But to be honest, I don't know. So a couple people I know will talk about this, that, oh, this card is so slept on, it's so blah, blah, blah. I have a hard time subscribing to that, I guess, because in my mind, you know, players are competitive, players want to win, and players will figure out pretty quickly what works and what isn't, right? The card pool really isn't that big, especially as the game has heavily suffered from power creep in the last, you know, quite a few sets now, since Opus 10, Opus 11. A lot of those old cards just aren't even worth looking at anymore. So, you know, there's still some that are relevant that make it up there, or maybe a new card will make an old card like that relevant, but there's just so much that isn't really worth it on a competitive level. So I don't think there's a whole lot that's like, man, if people would just give this card the time of day, it would be great. And what revives old cards, I'm going to reiterate a point I've said before here because it continues to be true, is a new card comes out that says, hey, if you can play it for free, it's great. Leviathan, Lord of the World, didn't really take off in Opus 14, and granted, that was a pretty insane meta, but even after that, he was always strong, he always did what he did. Why did he show up in Opus 18 all of a sudden? It's not because his effect changed, it's because that 9 in the corner became 0. You could play it for free. I mentioned in that Opus 17 or 18, it was an 18 meta review about the Lena, that you can apply that to anything. There's a Ject card coming out in Opus 20 that says, go find Braska's Final Aeon and play it for free. I mean, it's not as quick as the Lena, of course, but the effect is there. Look at Arc Chaos. No one really played that Chaos card when it first came out. Why is it showing up now? Chaos's effect didn't change, but you have a 9-cost card that said, actually, with this, play it for free. You can do that with anything. So yeah, find a card you like. Find one of these old cards and that costs way too much. Opus 7 Dark Sin, or Opus, what's the new one? The 16 Dark Sin. That costs 9 and is way too expensive. Okay, cool. Give me a new card now that just is actually, you just play it for free from anywhere. Deck, break zone, even if it's removed from game, your opponent's hand. You enter, you get that card, you play it to the field. You're going to see that card start popping up. Because you can do that for anything. Go find old Opus 7 Sephiroth, the Ice Legend that discards 2 an entry. It's Amaterasu bait. It's far too expensive to play these days. Give me a card that says, actually, now you just completely play it for free. It's going to show up again. So anything that is underrated or underplayed can be flipped by playing it for free. As a matter of fact, I have a little challenge for people. Build a modern deck, a modern Opus 1920 deck, and play it against someone who can only use Opus 1 cards. They're restricted to cards only from Opus 1. However, every single one of their cards has a cost of 0 in the corner, so they can play everything for free. Think about that. So the only backups you need are Shantoto, because everything else, you don't need backups, because you can play all your forwards for free. Your summons, you can 7 CP Odin at instant speed on their turn, and it doesn't cost anything. You just put the card down, say, there you go. See if you can beat that deck. See what that is like, even with cards that old. But again, if they're suddenly free, I bet they're pretty darn strong all of a sudden. So, I'm sorry I wasn't able to give you very specific, cards for each element, but I just don't think that's true. I think the cards that are played for a reason. People put in tons of time testing, and yeah, on occasion you'll get this, oh, we kind of didn't look at this thing, or we kind of overlooked this, but the cards that are played right now are played because they're what are good. If something else isn't underplayed, it's probably for a good reason. The Custom Card Man asks, FFTCG ban list. What can get unbanned/unrestricted? Also, should cards get restricted like Sophie? Okay, so I pulled up a quick little ban list here. I'm pretty sure this is everything that is currently banned. Obviously, Althea and Syldra will be added to this pretty soon. I kind of answered this in a previous question in some videos back, but people didn't really seem to appreciate my answer, so I'll try to be more succinct and sincere here. So could you, first of all, I'll go with the restricting. I'm a huge fan of restricting cards, and it seems like the design team should be too, because while this has never been confirmed by anyone that I'm aware of, there's this idea that they really don't want to ban legends, right? They really don't want to ban legend cards. So Sophie being a good example, they didn't really want to ban Sophie because she's a legend, so instead they restricted her instead. But I think the restriction of her really helped. Like, the card she's still Sophie when she comes out, but people don't really build the deck around her, and she's not as much of a pain as she was. So I think restricting would be huge. People always said in a game that's as searchable as fun, but again, there's so many ways to search out Sophie that hasn't mattered. She's still harder to see, and it means if you remove the one copy, okay, you're done with her now. You don't have to deal with her anymore. So I would be very happy to see plenty of cards get restricted before they get banned. As far as anything to be unbanned, I don't think you can unban Riku. Reactivation gets simpler and simpler all the time, and now granted, I wouldn't mind the mill strategy. I think that should be a legitimate strategy. But can Riku herself do it too easily? Yeah, most likely. I think you could unban Guido. I would have never even put Guido on there. I think it's absurd to me that he's on there just because of the Barrel Eye combo. And there's so many ways to interact with that, especially with Syldra going now too, where you can't even search this out anymore. Like, I don't know. It was one of those clunky pieces and it still required Barrel Eye to be on the field. So if you just killed Barrel Eye before you committed any forwards, I get it. I get they don't like the infinite kill thing, but there's other infinite stuff they're fine with. So what's the, I just, again, to me, there are so many dumb, busted things in this game. It's odd that some people are okay with some of those busted things, but not others. I don't see how Guido is any worse than any other thing that you can do the really truly crazy stuff in the game. So I think Guido would be fine. Mione, I'm happy, is gone. Obviously the infinite loop with the forward Riku and the Tillich was annoying, but it was just, again, it just fed into this wind thing of just replaying and abusing entry effects. Althea and Chocobo and Mione. Will Chocobo hit a ban? It makes you wonder, because Mione and Althea, like that. Okay, so with Althea going to be on the list soon, that's 2 wind cards that let you replay stuff. Like, we see a pattern here, right? That, hey, replaying and getting your effects over and over again is pretty insane, right? Like, I've made that argument for a while. You know, cards like Lulu, you weren't meant to be able to just infinitely recycle summons forever. There is supposed to be a limit to that. That's why you're allowed to put 3 copies of a card in your deck, and you should have to use those 3 copies and then you're done. Not just this infinite recycling that just happens nowadays. So Mione would stay gone. Gesper, I actually would be kind of curious to see what the game would be like if Gesper came back. He is multi-playable, so that's kind of the scary part, is that Gesper can, just really hit your hand hard. However, at least even in some of those old streams, usually the most I saw was 1 Gesper. Now, granted, yeah, they could have the nuts opening turn where they go discard Gesper, discard Gesper, discard Gesper, and then they just take 3 cards out of your hand before you've even begun to play. And is that stupid and unfun? Absolutely. But at the same time, we have locks. We have locks in the game right now. You know, when Ice Earth gets set up and they have Skill Toad and Biblos and Weiss and Unalesca, and you're drawing 2 for turn, you're throwing 1 out for Skill Toad, and then they rip 1 out for Unalesca, and that's you. That is your life for the rest of that game. Like, now maybe they're okay with that because it takes longer to get there, but I mean, that's not fun to play against. That's still miserable. But again, maybe Gesper's too quick. So him, I'd be curious to see what it would be like if he came back, but he may need to stay off there because he is pretty pretty strong. Doga, I actually thought never should have gone. To me, Sophie was clearly the problem of that deck. I actually thought Doga was really cool. I thought everyone always talked about, interesting ways to build the deck, and they talked about that with Mashari. Doga makes you build in interesting ways and these summon ways, and he did. And I thought he was a fine reward for that. Sophie was the problem. If you take Sophie away, you don't have that Doga, Ursula, Sophie opening turn where I'm going to kill you in 3 turns, which exists now in 13 anyway. Like, I guarantee you, if they had just banned Sophie instead, Doga would look so different. Now, granted, he does have Une now, and Earth Water continues to get very good cards, but he's also losing Syldra. Like, I think Doga, the text on Doga, I think is totally fine. He died to Amaterasu. Miss Dragon would eat it up too. Like, I think Doga was a cool idea, and for some reason he had to pay for the sins of, again, Sophie and I think Mashari and some other cards. Speaking of Mashari, she should never be unbanned. These break zone effects are, having played Magic the Gathering recently, it's a lot harder to fill your graveyard or your break zone in Magic. Not impossible, and there are definitely cards that do it, and I know there are decks built around those old dredge effects, but in FF, where you're just pitching cards there anyway, it's just absurd. These cards are absurd. Their cost reductions are absurd. Their action abilities are absurd. Mashri and Stern are just freaking bonkers. I mean, Stern made Chocobos like one of the best decks in that tournament. Chocobos, and they put Fat Chocobo on the watch list. Like, no, again, he's not the problem. This guy was the problem. Notice how the moment this guy left, Fat Chocobos just completely disappeared. So yeah, Stern Mashri can never come off, not unless the rules of the game change and you no longer pitch cards to pay for CP, which that of course will never happen. Sophie, I think, is good at restricted to 1. Again, would like to see more like this. Dataluma could probably come off. I don't know. He's one I'm not sure of because I remember how annoying he was to deal with back in the old days. However, there's a lot more things to deal with him. I think of like a Typhon. Like if I just Typhon your Dataluma and Typhon's not even a forward yet, bye-bye, there he goes. And I'd be curious to know if the whole Cactar Dataluma thing would still kind of hold up today. We've got a lot more 9Ks and things floating around. It was insanely annoying. It was super duper strong, but in my head, he doesn't seem as oppressive in today's world, but I could be totally wrong on that. Maybe he would still be a pain in the butt. And Thaumaturge, I think 100% could come off. Like, it's an enter the field and you discard 1. Like, we have that in a card called Argath, except Argath is unique, whereas Thaumaturge could be played 3. I mean, Turbo Disc, again, I just don't think discard is that good of a strategy anymore, especially even with, like, the Gesper, especially early aggressive discard. There's just so much more value in 2 CP cards that draw you value incidentally, EX bursts, etc. So I think Thaumaturge could 100% come back. And last but certainly not least, Kurjan asked thoughts on the Althea / Syldra ban. And I'm going to kind of just piggyback that as well, because Katsumoto piggybacked to that question. Will these bans be efficient enough to change the meta? So I'm just going to kind of answer these together. Okay, so I think these bans are great. And again, I'm a person who likes a lot of bans. I would have loved to have seen more. Like, for me, these aren't enough. I want to see even more bans. I would love to see tons of things banned, especially some restrictions. Give me some restrictions on some stuff too. But yeah, these cards were great in Opus 12. Althea was always a mistake. Again, Syldra, I don't think was quite as bad in Opus 12, as there just wasn't really the bonker stuff yet to support it. But I think that only lasted one Opus, because I think as soon as 13 came in and you had the Sarah backup and you had Sophie and Sarah Mobius and Doga, and you had these, again, multi-element cards that worked for it as well, I think it became a problem very, very quickly. And of course, a card like this is only going to get better with time. They'll keep printing water cards, they'll keep printing Category 5 characters, so this card will just continue to get better. Althea was always silly. You should absolutely go watch Chris Matisky's video on the Shikati channel. I can link that here too. If you want a detailed breakdown of why Althea was stupid, but it just did too much repeatedly. Like, there are so many ways you could have adjusted this card to make it less oppressive if it had no entry effect. Like, what if it legit came in, did nothing, just had summoning sickness, and then you could dull her and then do the protection? Honestly, she still would probably be absurd. It just wouldn't be as quote-unquote quick. I think Steve D mentioned once that, like, if she cost 5, she'd still be absurd. Yeah, that action ability is just insane. If she broke herself when she did the action ability, the card would probably be fine. If that, you choose a character other than Althea you control, and you can even word it in a way so that she doesn't break until it resolves. It's not, like a lot of these backups, it'll say, dull it, put it in the break zone, choose one, blah, 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 and you lose the backup regardless of the effect resolves. I would have been fine if you had her, it's just like, hey, if you, like, prevent the Althea effect from resolving, she stays there. But yeah, what if you had to dull her, choose a character other than Althea or control, return it to your hand, Althea goes to the break zone. Boom. And then, yeah, maybe if you wanted to go out of your way then to do like a Kusith to recur the Althea and then replay it and go through all that again, but then you're taking all these extra steps. So there's so many things they could have done to tweak it, but as she is, she's just absurd, and the ability to just recur and replay over and over again was just silly. So yeah, I think both these bands are very good. Happy to see them. I honestly wasn't sure they were going to do them. Part of me was kind of convinced they weren't going to hit them. Syldra seemed to be the one everyone was clamoring for, so I'm glad they slapped Althea on there. But again, these cards have been a terror for a long, long time. So why now? Earlier? The competitive scene, I guess, is the only thing you could... It's the only thing that's really different, is that now we have events back. But again, I think I and anyone who pays attention to that could have told you, like, these cards are very strong. Like, yeah, I didn't need to see them dominating Materia Cups to say, oh, I didn't realize Syldra was a good card. I knew Syldra was a good card. I think we all did. So happy to see him go. How will it affect the meta? Well, they won't go into effect until Opus 20 releases, in which case the meta will change up regardless, because that's just what always happens. So it's hard to say for sure on that. One thing is, of course, water will, of course, be weaker, as will, wind. Losing what I proclaimed earlier as their best cards will hurt them. I don't think it's going to kill them, though. Like, I've seen so many people already, water's dead. Water's absolutely dead. Like, I don't think it's dead. It still has Lena, Leviathan, Ash, Blue Worm, Tros, Toneberry, Echidna. It has one of the best range of summons in the entire game. It's got Tidus, like Purim. It has incredible cards. I just think now you're going to have to play a little more of a consistent deck. You're going to have to play the the backup searcher, Sarah, and then go search out other cards. You're just not going to be able to get away with these 5-8 backup decks and have Syldra just solve everything for you without even trying. You're going to have to actually build it for a little more consistency. And then Wind, of course, again, Wind is just, someone messaged me about like, oh, good, I'll never get locked twice in a turn anymore if Althea's gone. I was like, talking about an Ice Wind deck. I was like, have you played against Ice Wind? Like, trust me, they don't need Althea to do that. Some decks even cut Althea or barely used her. Wind is still going to be an absurd, efficient late game monster. This will just, hopefully, it will slow it down a tiny, tiny bit. But again, look at the most recent Materia Cup from Texas. Sam Toole didn't need Althea to Luso on turn 2. Althea wasn't a part of that. She would have been summoning sick. He didn't need her. So, am I happy she's gone? Absolutely. Does this mean Wind is going to change? No. Wind is still going to be really, really strong and really ridiculous. But hopefully, it's a step in the right direction. That's all the questions for this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted. Enjoy your holiday. And look forward to my spoiler coming out probably next Friday, the 14th. The contest is still open if you would like to make a guess. We've had a lot of really good guesses on there. And I know the entrants will probably be excited to see whether they were able to guess correctly or not. So check that out if you haven't already. See you for that spoiler video. And until next time, take care.